Hey, thank you so much for listening, joining my YouTube channel. I am so excited to introduce you. Seriously, this dude is one of my all-time favorite people, like legitimately. He's in my probably top 3. This is my friend, Nathan Foster. Hello, Nathan. Thank you for hanging out today.
Of course. Thank you, Sarah. Good to be with you.
Yep. And just a little bit of background. So maybe not everybody in the audience or listening, whoever, they may not know kind of some of who you are. So can you just give us a little quick, like a bio, thumbnail, a little bio on you, and then we'll kind of jump into, hey, God, can we talk?
Yeah, sure. So I work for Renovari, a spiritual formation renewal effort. And I'm the director of community life for them, do events and a podcast and some community efforts. Backgrounds in social work and as a professor, but been doing this for, I guess, 6 or 7 years now.
Nice. So Nathan, we're going to talk about chapter 8, which is my emotions are raw. So
mine too.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I think we have to give ourselves permission, so to speak, to have raw emotions.
Yeah, I do too.
What did you think about as you kind of read through the chapter? What were some of your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I thought you did a really good job with pulling out all these, biblical reference after biblical reference, walking through the Old Testament of times where people were honest, and it's such a helpful picture. And then the way you tied in creativity, I actually didn't see that one coming. And as I sat with it, I thought that actually is a really good entry point for people to have those honest conversations.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about like spiritual formation and like honest conversations, how do you see those working together?
Critical, and maybe a really simple way to think of it is in our human relationships. You can't go very far in a marriage when you're not honest with each other, or even a friendship. And I think that mirrors in our relationship with God. We get to go to a whole new level when we're honest and when we're raw. We go somewhere so much deeper than we could if we'd withheld who we are and how we feel and what we think. So yeah, I think it's critical.
And the other thing too, do you find sometimes I think we're not raw and honest, and do you find sometimes like with people around you or people you interact with, even yourself, are there some times or reasons when you're not, or you hear someone not being honest with God?
Yeah, I think I'll start with other people. I think it's often born out of a really good heart, in the sense of not wanting to offend God, or feeling like you have to be in a certain space to be presentable before God. You have to kind of work through some of the difficult feelings before you can have a conversation with God. And so there's a sort of like naive reverence in that, of really wanting to be presentable, and there is something to that, but we do see littered through the scriptures, even in the words of Jesus, some very honest statements, and the Psalms are a great example, as you write about, as a model for some of this. I don't know. I was trying to think where I picked it up, because I'm probably the most honest conversations I have is in prayer, and yet even in that I can withhold and not necessarily know. And usually the push for me is to be looking more at myself and what's really going on internally, and then being honest in prayer helps open that up. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question, Sarah, but
Totally. And I want to ask this question too, because I agree with you in terms of it's hard sometimes in myself, and I think what you said was really powerful, that when we look in and looking at ourselves and what's inside, I think that when we don't do that, I think we can get kind of veneer,
Mhm,
and thin, and not like we're lying to God, but like he's kind of withholding.
mhm.
Do you find
It's
that
like
for
a
yourself?
what's up?
Do you find that for yourself?
Um, you know, not so much these days, these years. It's been quite a while ago that I um, got desperate enough to quit playing games
Mm,
in that sense. And I find it just, I mean, those moments of kind of guttural honesty of yelling, crying, pleading, um, you know, uh, uh, that just opened up a whole new door in terms of relationship with God that I don't ever want to go back. So I don't, it's just, I want to be honest, I thought of an example that probably people under 40 won't get, but that's okay. Do you remember Leave It to Beaver?
yeah.
Uh, Eddie Haskell?
Yeah.
Yeah. The friend that would talk to the parrots, like he thought they wanted to. And I thought our prayers could be a little bit like that. Very, oh, everything's good, Mrs. Cleaver. Oh, yes, we're doing exactly what we're supposed to do. And it's just so like, it's a good word, veneer. It's something, it's communication, but it's, there's so much more, maybe
Mhm.
so much more.
And I think too, and I liked what you said. It's communication, but it's not necessarily connection.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. And maybe go back to human relationships.
Mhm.
We can be, and some relationships we need to be shallow, like that's what they need to be. But our deep friendships, the times where we're really honest with each other, that's when we grow close. That's when intimacy occurs.
Mm,
Frightening, it's uncomfortable. It can be awful in ways, but also really beautiful. So,
mhm. Yeah, and messy.
always, always messy.
And I think some of us don't want messy. We want to have everything pristine and kind of, very postured, and everything looks good. But I think we do it
Absolutely.
at the expense of internal.
Yeah. There's a cost to it. That's
Mhm,
right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. We don't like it's so much easy when things are tidy and black and white, very
mhm,
clear. It pushes us to uncomfortable places when things are not tidy, but
mhm,
it pushes us to reality and something
mhm.
real and
Yeah,
something honest, which
yeah.
I value, I guess.
Mhm. I do too, because the depth in that, and the connection in it
Yeah.
is, in my opinion, a lot more oof, palatable than kind of that froth. It's like eating cotton candy versus a filet mignon,
That's
if
right.
you're a steak
Yeah.
eater or whatever.
It's sustainable.
Mhm,
Like there's a longevity to that. The
mhm,
surface thing, there's only so many years,
yeah.
you can hang around with that.
Mhm,
And maybe again, you could think of relationships same way, right? Only
mhm,
so many years you can keep things shallow until it just aches.
mhm,
And
mhm.
um,
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And I find in some of my friendships, they stay, and I think some of our relationships, they stay kind of more in that shallow, and kind of, remember the swimming pools that have those zero depths, so
yeah.
that's like a gradual
Uh-huh.
deepening. And so I think the potential with God is, and I have this little mantra, and I think it's really something worth thinking about. The depth of a relationship is only as deep as the person who wants it the least.
That's right. Yep. Yep.
And so if I think if I appreciate God wants depth with us, then we get to participate, calibrate, join, cooperate, or not.
Right. I think God respects our resistance
Mhm.
and honors that we don't want to go deep,
Yep.
or we only want to go this deep, and is quite patient with us through that.
Mhm.
But it is a very deep pool if we would like to go.
Yeah.
Very,
Yeah.
very deep.
Yeah. 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 I love that. I love that God is always like, hey, it feels to me like God's always saying, hey, let's go deeper, Sarah,
Yeah.
inviting us.
Yes, it's invitational. There's no, um, but we get so much out of it, you know.
Yeah. Totally true. Totally true. So, hey, Nathan, I want to ask you on this conversation starter because a lot of the conversation starters from the book have come out of a spiritual formation, and a lot of the influences I've had are with Renovari, and love the investment that I've had over the years, decades, from Renovari. But this particular conversation starter relates to creativity.
Mhm.
And I wanted to kind of ask your thoughts about how do you think that's an interesting springboard for conversation with God, creativity?
I do. I mean, it like I said, caught me a little off guard, but as I was sitting with it, absolutely, because it's disarming, and it uses potentially another language, a language of the heart of sorts, because creativity, and I'm not talking about whether it's good in terms of societal's view, but
Right.
it's just coming from inside, it's just and so it does lend itself to a real, I might be able to paint a picture about how angry I am at God
Yeah.
in a way that I can't say it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So for yourself, do you find what would you say would be some of those creative outlets for you, or ways that you do conversations with God? What seems to be more natural tendencies for you in terms of
Mhm.
like conversation starters?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's changes through the years, and I find different mediums and mechanisms helpful in different seasons. The last few years, it's been writing my prayers, and not. It's one thing to pray a very honest prayer silently or out loud, but to write it, and 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 interestingly enough, I do use a sort of art, although you wouldn't recognize it as art, but I mean, exclamation points and circling this and that and different drawings to help with that. I've just found that so helpful, partially because it slows me down enough to hear back
Mhm.
and to really think, is this the word I want to say? Is this really what's true? Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's been I love writing my prayers, and
Mhm.
I've done a little of, not much, a little of editing, meaning I sometimes wonder if the Psalms, I'll read the Psalms and think, well, they just wrote those, but most of the time things written are rewritten and crafted, and and the Psalms are so beautiful that I tend to think they were that way. So taking
Mhm.
the time to, like, I'm going to write a very simple prayer, and I'm going to get every word, I'm going to edit it and just really take my time with it.
Mhm.
That's a creative endeavor I've been working a little bit with, and would like to
Mhm.
uh, do more.
Mhm. You find also some creativity in, so I remember you're a musician as well, right?
Yeah,
If I remember right, you play the bass.
that's right. Yeah.
And so have you seen any of like writing music or like playing music as some of that creativity and connecting with God?
Yeah, I will do, I'll ask, what should I play? How should I approach this? What does this song need? How can I best serve this song? And it's a wonderful little exchange. I don't know that people would notice much difference in the way I play a song, but for me, it's this kind of co-laboring. And I used to play in a worship band, and the guy was, I mean, he was horrible for a musician in the sense that he would just write songs on spot, and he would vamp them for 5 minutes, and he wouldn't tell us. And but I loved it. It was great, and it gave that space for me as a musician to then creatively, prayerfully, to stop playing, to start playing, to play fast, to play loud,
Mhm.
and it was great. You know, it was
Mhm.
a way for me to co-labor and participate in my life with God
Mhm.
in an honest way. Yeah.
Mhm. And did you see it too in creativity? so when you taught, because you taught at university, did you
Mhm.
see some creativity in the ways you taught and how you taught, some of the
Mm.
methods?
Oh yeah, that was what's so fun about it. You can just try stuff out, and if it doesn't work, you don't do it again. Yeah, I think I'm glad you picked up on creativity because you know we really don't know that much about God, and that's okay. I mean, we know all we can handle in a sense, or can know. But one of the things we do know very clearly is that God likes to make things. Creator, and you look around at God's artwork of sorts. Um, it's just magnificent, and there's so much detail and beauty in that. So if
Mhm.
we image bearers, creatures made in God's image, it would make good sense that we would have some of those same attributes and characteristics. So I think
Yeah.
part of being human is to create and to be creative. Now, culturally, we destroy that beautiful thing by kind of demanding some sort of performance or standard of what, you know,
Mhm.
that's not necessarily helpful, but just making things and making things with God. Um,
Mhm.
that's a spiritual act as profound as about any.
Mhm. And I think too, if we have the idea, if my creativity is for public consumption,
Mhm.
then it can be a little challenging. I think, like you said, we kind of just destroy sometimes the intimacy and connection potentially, because then it's for a human audience. But I find for myself, when I keep kind of that creativity, I don't necessarily make it for human consumption, but just like you said, I write, I do exclamation points, circle stuff, underline, and that's like me participating, me conversing in that creative space. And it's not for public consumption, but it's between God and me, working, talking together, creating together, exploring. It's like an adventure, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good phrase, distinguishing what's for public consumption and what's for not, right?
Mm.
But also not bringing into private prayerful work our own judgment, right?
Right.
You notice when people show you work they've done, they always tell you how awful it is before they, and
Yeah.
that's just not helpful
Mhm.
at all.
Yeah.
I met a lady who um, every day she draws,
Mhm.
and it's her prayer life. And she showed me some of her drawings, and it was interesting because like pictures would emerge and verses would emerge that she didn't know were going to emerge, and then she'd kind of go with it. And I found it absolutely beautiful. She did this for years and never showed anyone for fear of,
Hmm.
kind of judgment. But it meant a lot to her.
Yeah. Yeah. And
It meant
it's
a
a
lot to me,
space,
actually.
yeah, and a space too where you sense God, um
Yeah.
in ways that you don't. I mean, I think it's really can be very refreshing. And I think that honesty too goes pairs well with creativity.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, and I take a very broad view of creativity. I'm building rooms and a structure in this building, and it's construction,
yep.
but there's a prayerful creativity. Where should I put this? How should I
Hmm.
do this? Hey, Nate, what about this? What about
Yeah.
that? So maybe because there's potentially an active exchange, it lends itself to an honesty. I mean,
Hmm.
you're already going at a deeper level.
Yeah.
Um, you're
Yeah.
cutting that veneer.
Yeah. Yeah. You're cutting through the veneer and kind of, I think it's a little bit of a playground.
A playground and there's a therapeutic piece
Hmm.
too.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Totally. Totally. Well, Nathan, thank you for hanging out and chatting with me. It's
of
fun to
course.
see you get to connect and talk through. You're an author, and we've talked about writing, and so it's fun to do author to author and have some of that, ideas exchange. And what about this? And so, thank you. I really
Yes.
appreciate your time.
Hey, you're welcome. Always good to be with you, Sarah.
Totally fun. Thanks again.